Most people believe success belongs to the loud, the fast, and the socially effortless. They assume that if something has not bloomed early, it never will, but history quietly disagrees. There exists a rare kind of personality that moves against the current of time, developing slowly, inwardly, almost invisibly. These individuals often feel out of sync with the world in their early years. They question more than they act, observe more than they perform, and carry a depth that society does not know how to measure. While others build identities by imitation, this rare personality is busy dismantling illusions. It spends years wrestling with doubt, solitude, and inner contradiction. What appears as delay is actually incubation. What looks like confusion is a private dialogue with meaning itself. Life does not hand them quick rewards because their growth is not designed for speed. It is designed for substance. As the years pass, something remarkable happens. The noise fades, the masks fall away, and the world begins to crave what this personality has been quietly refining all along: clarity, depth, originality, and psychological strength. When success finally arrives, it is not fragile or accidental. It is rooted in self-knowledge, shaped by endurance, and guided by an inner compass that no trend can corrupt. This is why the rarest personality does not peak early. It matures, and when it rises to last. In my own life, I have learned that invisibility is not the same as insignificance. There was a long period where my efforts went unnoticed, my depth misunderstood, and my silence mistaken for weakness. While others seemed to move effortlessly through life, gaining recognition early, I felt as if I was standing behind a glass wall, watching but not belonging. I questioned myself constantly, wondering why my path felt slower, heavier, and more inward. Yet beneath that quiet struggle, something essential was taking shape. I was not building an image, I was building a foundation. Every moment of solitude forced me to confront myself without distraction. Every failure stripped away borrowed beliefs and exposed what was truly mine. While the world rewarded speed and performance, my inner life demanded honesty and integration. I could not move forward without understanding why I moved at all. This made progress slow, but it also made it real. Being invisible early taught me patience. It taught me to listen more than I spoke, and to observe patterns others rushed past. I learned that many people succeed quickly by adapting to expectations, but those expectations change. When they do, what remains is often emptiness. My delay protected me from that fate. I was learning how to stand alone, how to think independently, how to endure uncertainty without collapsing into imitation. Over time, I noticed a shift. The same qualities that once isolated me became sources of strength. Depth turned into clarity. Sensitivity turned into insight. The questions that haunted me became tools for understanding others and myself. When opportunities finally appeared, I was ready in a way that surprise success never prepares a person to be. I did not fear losing myself because I had already spent years finding myself. What makes this personality unstoppable later in life is not ambition but alignment. Action begins to flow naturally when inner conflict resolves. Energy that was once scattered by doubt becomes focused and deliberate. Decisions come from inner necessity rather than external pressure. At that point, success is no longer a performance, but an expression of who one has become. I now understand that early invisibility was a kind of protection. It kept me from shallow victories and premature identities. It forced me to grow roots before reaching for light. When the world finally took notice, I did not need its approval to continue. I had already learned how to walk my path without witnesses. This is why the rarest personality does not compete loudly or arrive early. It emerges when the time is right, carrying a depth that cannot be shaken by trends or opinions. What once seemed like a disadvantage reveals itself as destiny unfolding at its proper pace, transforming quiet endurance into lasting strength and making the later rise not just powerful, but inevitable in my life. Starting behind never felt like a strategic choice. It felt like a flaw. While others seemed to understand the rules early, move confidently, and collect visible progress, I was still questioning the game itself. I often felt slower, not because I lacked ability, but because I could not move without meaning. Every step required understanding, and every decision demanded alignment with something deeper than approval or reward. This made my journey look delayed from the outside, but inwardly it was intensely active. Thinking deeply became both my burden and my gift. My mind did not settle for surface explanations or borrowed truths. I needed to know why people acted as they did, why patterns repeated, why I felt different even when I tried to fit in. This constant reflection isolated me at times, but it also sharpened my awareness. I began to see connections others overlooked, motives beneath words, and long-term consequences hidden inside short-term gains. What felt like overthinking was actually a form of preparation. Starting behind forced me to develop inner strength before outer success. I could not rely on praise or momentum to carry me forward, so I learned how to sustain myself internally. I learned discipline without external pressure, resilience without applause, and direction without maps designed by others. Each setback became a teacher, each delay a signal to look inward rather than give up. While some people advanced quickly by following established paths, I was quietly carving my own. As time passed, the advantage revealed itself. When challenges arose, I was not shaken easily because I had already faced uncertainty within myself. When complexity appeared, I did not panic because complexity had always been my native language. I noticed that many who rose early struggled later, trapped by identities they had outgrown or success they did not fully understand. My slower beginning spared me that confusion. I was not racing toward a role. I was becoming a person. Rising higher did not happen in a sudden leap. It unfolded as a natural consequence of integration. My thoughts, values, and actions began to align, creating a quiet but unstoppable momentum. Decisions became clearer, energy more focused, and effort more efficient. What once took enormous inner struggle now flowed with purpose. The depth I cultivated early gave me stability later, allowing growth without fragmentation. The hidden advantage of the rarest minds is not intelligence alone but coherence. When inner contradictions dissolve, strength multiplies. When one knows why they move, endurance replaces urgency. I now see that starting behind was never a disadvantage. It was an initiation. Thinking deeper was never a weakness. It was a training ground. And rising higher was not an accident. It was the natural result of a life shaped from the inside out, where meaning led first and achievement followed, solid, enduring, and unshakable in my life. Late recognition was not a dramatic moment of discovery, but a long, quiet season of being overlooked. While others were celebrated early, praised for visible achievements and quick confidence, I remained in the background, refining something I could not yet name. At times, this invisibility felt painful. It made me question my worth and wonder whether depth had any place in a world that rewarded speed. Yet what I did not understand then was that recognition arriving late was shaping me for endurance rather than excitement. I watched many people rise quickly, fueled by external validation and constant momentum. Their energy came from being seen, admired, and affirmed. Mine could not. I learned early that applause was unreliable, and that identity built on attention could collapse just as quickly as it formed. This forced me inward. I had to confront my motives, fears, contradictions, and unintegrated parts long before success gave me the option to ignore them. It was uncomfortable, but it was honest. This inner work created a different relationship with effort. I was not chasing results to prove myself. I was learning to act in alignment with who I was becoming. That difference matters more than it appears. When effort is driven by image, exhaustion is inevitable. When effort is driven by meaning, it renews itself. While others burned bright and fast, I burned slow and steady, often doubting whether the flame mattered at all. Late recognition taught me patience, not as resignation, but as trust in process. I stopped measuring my progress against timelines that were never designed for my nature. I understood that some personalities are not meant to bloom early because their strength is not decorative. It is structural. It needs time to set. It needs pressure to harden. Without those years of apparent stagnation, the later rise would have been fragile. When recognition finally came, it did not intoxicate me. I had already lived without it. I had already learned who I was in silence. This made success grounding rather than disorienting. I did not need to maintain a persona or chase constant affirmation. I could accept acknowledgement without becoming dependent on it. This alone protected me from burnout. I began to notice a pattern around me. Those who achieved early often struggled later. They became trapped by expectations, exhausted by maintaining an image, or disconnected from the deeper reasons they started. Their success demanded constant performance. Mine did not. Because my growth had been inward before it was outward, I could rest without guilt and act without panic. I was not afraid of slowing down because slowing down had always been part of my rhythm. Lasting greatness, I learned, is not about intensity but integration. It comes from aligning thought, emotion, and action into a coherent whole. The rarest personality is capable of this because it spends years wrestling with inner conflict instead of escaping it. That struggle builds psychological stamina. When challenges arise later in life, they do not shatter the self, they activate it. Winning when others burn out is not about superiority, it is about sustainability. My energy is not borrowed from excitement or comparison. It comes from purpose that has been tested by doubt. It comes from values that survived isolation. It comes from a sense of self that does not require constant reinforcement. This makes effort feel natural rather than forced. I now see that late recognition was a gift disguised as delay. It protected me from shallow victories and premature certainty. It allowed me to grow roots deep enough to support whatever heights might come. When greatness emerges from that foundation, it does not fade quickly. It does not need to be defended. It simply continues. The rarest personality does not win by outrunning others. It wins by outlasting illusions, trends, and exhaustion. What endures is not brilliance alone, but depth that has been lived, integrated, and patiently earned, making the later stages of life not a decline, but a quiet and powerful ascent.